Oh my gosh, Laura, I am so excited to have you here. I can't wait to dig in. You guys, you're in for a treat. Laura's journey has been so inspiring. I can't wait to connect you guys and let you know everything that I've learned from her from just reading the book and a little bit of learning. So thank you for being here, Laura. Appreciate you.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, um, for those that don't know, Laura wrote a book, and I'll probably explain this in the show notes and everything, but Laura wrote a phenomenal book. I could not put it down, honestly. She's just so talented at telling the story. I felt like I was there with her. And what's crazy is that I was actually in New Mexico when she was talking about the part of getting married. Oh, I won't spoil it, but like I just felt like I was with you the entire time and the whole
Aw.
journey. So that was pretty awesome. Um, so I want to start with like give us an update where you're at now, what's happening in your life, what's going on with you right now.
Sure. Yeah, I'm on a book tour right now. And I'm in this weird space where I've done 15 different events now. I just got back from Seattle this morning and I was in Denver a few days before. And I'm gonna let myself rest now for three for 3 weeks, and I'm really looking forward to it because I think I need a little bit of balance and I don't know, like a little bit of a sense of normalcy. And I feel like I've earned it. I've been working really hard. But I'm almost feeling lately like the book tour is like a new book, or it's like it's just another story in itself, getting to connect with all these amazing people who are reading the book or, just being introduced to it and having the opportunity to speak about it in front of people. That's been really enjoyable and a blessing for me. I had no idea as a writer that I was going to enjoy speaking so much.
Yeah. What's interesting is that when I was reading the book, you were saying, I am fulfilling my dad's wish list. And and now that my dad's wish list is done, now I'm doing my own wish list,
Mhm.
which is like to me, I get goosebumps just thinking about that of how empowering your journey began by helping someone else or doing it for someone else, and then now is doing it for yourself. And this, I totally agree with you. There is like many books in you already to be written. Do you mind telling us a little bit about the book and just a little summary for those that are curious about reading your book?
Sure. My book is about how when I was 38 years old, about 6 months after my wedding, my brother discovered my dad's bucket list. And he was about to get married himself. We were up visiting him, and he had just bought his first house. And it turned out he had had this list inside of a box for 13 years. Our father passed away when I was 25 and he was 23 because of a distracted driver. And I had actually become an activist with safe driving for a couple of years around the time my husband proposed. I think because it was bringing me, it was bringing me a sense of agency with what happened because I still had a lot of leftover anger about the way my dad died. And now that my husband had proposed marriage, I was feeling some dread about walking down the aisle and feeling like he wasn't going to be there with me, which was a thing that, of course, you always think will happen as little girl. And doing the activism, speaking in high schools. Some of my activism involved running. I would do marathons, and then I would raise money for organizations that were trying to change laws. That was making me feel a little bit more in control of the situation. But I also was somewhat frustrated by my activism because I felt like I just feel like my dad wouldn't want me to keep talking about his death. And he was such a lively, just full person. And I wanted to represent him in a way that felt to me like it was fully him. And I think I had always sort of wanted to do that since he died because it felt so abrupt. And I felt like I hadn't given him a sense of legacy or almost like a dignified send off when he died. So I think when the list showed up, even though he wrote it in 1978 when I was a baby and the term bucket, it just struck me immediately as this is the way I could do that. My husband only met him one time. He died 5 days later. And he knew as soon as he saw it that this was a book. And he works in publishing and he's a book designer himself. So we set out to do it. And, it's funny because people ask me a lot, how did you know that you needed to do this? And it really was a spiritual thing. I sometimes I compare it to that moment, in myth where the future King Arthur pulls Excalibur out of the stone. Like
Yes.
it
Yeah.
felt like it was a spiritual calling for me that I was supposed to finish this list and write a book about it. And the book is, sometimes people tell me it's a lot more than they thought it would be. They thought it was just going to be a chronological telling of me going on all these adventures, which I did talk about a little bit on Instagram and my blog while I was doing it. But it's also about my dad, and it's about me, and it's about my growth. And the only way I think that I could fully illustrate the growth that I was experiencing because of this project was by going back to the past and sharing some of the things I had experienced as a kid, and things that were shaping my identity along the way.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was listening to your book and I was saying, this is a movie. Like, you need to turn this into a movie. I don't know if they've
I'm
asked you
trying.
already. Yes, but I
Yeah.
was like, this will be an amazing movie. And I love I wrote down so many of your quotes because they were just gold for me. One of the quotes that you said was, you can't be heard if you refuse to be seen. Like,
Yeah.
that gave me goosebumps. How did you come about so many intuitive and spiritual connections and insights? Like, were you always like that growing up, or how did that develop?
Maybe it was dormant. I don't know. I mean, I think I have always been a very introspective person. And getting to write this book was helping me access something, access my subconscious, access something in me that really wanted expression. I mean, when you read that line, what did that mean to you?
When I thought about it, is so many of us want to be heard. But when we're not being vulnerable and we're not showing our authentic self, then how can people really hear the truth of who we are if we're not showing the truth of who we are? Is that what you meant by that, or
Yeah,
is?
yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
because it was like I believe that line comes in chapter one when it was a moment where I was doing the first list item and I was completing running 10 miles straight, but I also forgot that that meant I couldn't stop to use the bathroom. So inevitably, I started peeing my pants, and I had to make a decision, right? Like, am I so embarrassed that I'm just gonna give up on this list item and maybe do it another day and go find a bathroom, or am I just gonna be okay with it, And it just struck me as I was writing about it later, how many times in my life I'd been in situations like that where I limited how much of myself I was willing to show other people just so I could be liked, or just so I could be respected, and had created such a persona around myself of this person I wanted everyone to see. And when you do that, I guess it feels safer, right? Like it feels like, okay, I feel in control. Like I said before, like doing the activism was giving me more of a sense of control. And when you have a mask and that's what you show people, you get to feel in control. But there's a big difference between feeling liked because you're in control and truly known. And the only way you're going to get that real authentic connection and love is if you're just like, here's me, warts and all, and I'm okay with it. And that's powerful because when you get to experience that with other people because you're showing up as you, that's when you get the growth. That's when you start to become more than you thought you could be. And that, you know, that's being heard, I think. You can't expect people to dig through multiple layers to get to the real you. Like it's so much easier to have that connection if you're just showing up as you in that moment. And it's not easy. Like that really was my first lesson with the list. I had to find a way to get there because I didn't have time for all the layers doing 54 items in 6 years. Quite honestly, it was a limitation.
That's awesome. It's so cool how you showed throughout the book your connection, your spiritual connection with your dad and how you listen to the messages. It's like in every part, I felt like your dad was with you and you expressed it in such a beautiful way, uh, feeling connected to your dad in so many ways. Is this something that you developed after your dad passed? Is that something that you, or you've always been sort of in tune and intuitive in that sense?
I think there's a sense that there's a chance I always was,
Mm-hmm.
and it was not being used. Like, I mean, because I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first time feeling something like that when I was in high school and I was running late for school and I had to figure out a way to get there and I just started walking. And I had a very sheltered upbringing. Like I lived in the suburbs of Wilmington, Delaware. I didn't walk anywhere. We drove everywhere. And I couldn't comprehend that like this one little corner of the highway was not a place I should be walking. And I
Mm-hmm.
sort of like made a run for it. And I remember distinctly feeling as I did this at age 16, or it must have been 15. I couldn't have had a driver's license yet. I remember feeling almost like a hand pushing me to go
Wow.
faster across
Wow.
this intersection. Not like a large hand, almost like a
Yes.
cartoonish like hand of God or
Yes.
something. But I remember
Yes.
feeling that and thinking something had protected me. That's
Mm-hmm.
the first time I can recall having any kind of intuitive connection or a sense of something bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And also before 9/11, like the morning of 9/11, I woke up in a panic and I had
Mm.
some sense that something was happening. And then
Wow.
later that, of course, I'm sure a skeptical person would be like, oh, yeah, it's easy to connect one to the other after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you woke up with a panic. Maybe that was a coincidence. It happened the same day as 9/11. Okay. But I still believe that that was me having an inner
Totally.
knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was such an enormous event, it was this really
Mm.
spiritually charged event that
Yes.
that might be why. And even, and I wrote about this in the book, the week before my dad died, when we came back from visiting Delaware, my husband had met him for the first time. I saw a billboard and suddenly knew I wasn't going to see him in
Yes.
this
Yes.
life. I wasn't going to
Yes.
interact with him in body again.
Mm.
And
Mm.
uh, I just started having these feelings of dread before something really big was going to happen. And I
Mm.
was learning to trust them, but that really
Mm.
was the extent of it. It wasn't until I agreed to do this project and go after his dreams that I really started hearing, two or three word sentences from him here and there, and noticing guidance, noticing suddenly I was seeing hearts every day, noticing when I felt like he was communicating, when a song played or an animal showed up. And we started having this grasshopper show up every single year on the anniversary of his death. I mean, come on.
I
And there
know.
were so many serendipitous things that would happen with the list, like the right person I needed to meet to make something happen, like talk with the president. Jimmy Carter's biographer showing up when he did, the tuxedo I needed to own a tuxedo showing up in the window of the boutique.
Yes.
Just crazy timing of things that I never could have orchestrated myself. And what was beginning to happen was I was just starting to trust that my
Yes.
dad's spirit was part of this and this was a partnership and he was
Mm.
helping me. And even in the writing, I mean, there were so many times during the writing where I was afraid of my own voice and I would really trust that he was prodding me along and trying to give me courage.
In so many sections, you spoke about your dad giving you a very clear message, like, yes, here, do this. Like,
Hmm.
and that honestly, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it because I can feel in your book, I can feel the emotion of everything. I could feel when your voice would break a little bit, and it was just like melt my heart thinking about it. And I could also sense the empowerment. You quoted so many powerful women in your references, women's feats, running, or Sacagawea swimming, or Maria
Yeah.
Teresa, like so many instances where you pulled in that goddess or that empowered warrior that you are to get you through. And what a beautiful experience. And I wonder though if that's something that um, you had it purposely put in the book, or is that something that really has guided you? Um,
Yeah, it was guiding me naturally. I mean, I would research every list item, and the thing that would shock me every time was just these incredible historical women who had done whatever the list item was. Because I'm approaching
exactly.
this as, okay, this is a man's list from 1978. It's crazy that a woman in 2017 is doing this, you know? And then when I would discover these stories about incredible women who had been on these adventures, I mean, one of my favorites that I don't think ended up making it into the book was Nellie Bly. You know, like in the
Mm,
1800s, she was the first woman to travel around the world. And people don't often know about her and how, think about all the difficulties she encountered because back then women weren't allowed to travel alone, you know?
mhm.
And I think I
Yeah,
was supposed to learn about her because now here I am and I just went to Denver and Seattle alone for a book tour and
so
for
cool.
part of the list and I wrote about this in the book. I went to Vienna and Berlin alone for 2 weeks and
Yes.
it's crazy to me now that there was a time when I thought that was too scary, when I thought that was a bad idea for me to be
Mhm,
doing. And
mhm.
I think, yeah, I genuinely think my dad was sort of trying to remind me of the girl I was and how he would take us on these hikes, and he would teach me how to be the navigator and how to be the person who was going to find our way back home. And I think this was a skill he knew I needed to have in my life because I was going to be a woman who made independent choices and who guided other people. And I think he saw that in me at a very young age. And once I got to a certain age, and I think a lot of women go through this, it's like, society almost starts to tell you your value is in your belonging. Your value is in the role that you play in other people's lives, whether that's as, first a daughter and a sister, and then later as a mother and a wife and a grandmother and so forth. And I love my family and I love my husband and I love the roles that I get to play, but those roles are, no, for me, no different than they would be for a man in his life. Like they're just my roles, they're not who I am.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I allowed my insecurity about, watching other women in my life start to acquire more roles, for lack of a better way of explaining that, like getting married and becoming mothers. And as I'm watching it happen, I'm like, oh, I want to be on par with everyone else. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
be left behind. And I think that happens to us as women. Like, are we still valuable? Are we getting too old? And it's so
Mhm.
ridiculous because it's like, who
Yes.
cares? Like, that's not who your spirit is. That's not who you really are. How can
Mhm.
you find your real path if you're obsessed with feeling like you've been pushed off to the sidelines of the road everybody else is on? And
Yes.
and that being so focused on that for so long was seriously limiting me, and I didn't know it. Like I didn't know because I'm so worried, like I'm not walking down an aisle at the same age as other women I know. I'm missing out on the fact that, oh, one day I'm going to be walking down a road in Denver because I'm going to my own book event from a book that I wrote about this independent life I finally claimed for myself, and I just think there's so many other women out there who are like that, who are truly very individual and independent, and they're missing it. And they're that way for a reason.
Yes. I love how you were talking about your insecurities and you're so genuine about that. Even in the book, you talked a little bit about your the struggles that you have with all these doctors giving you different medications for mental
Oh,
health
yeah.
and all of that. It was just like I'm blown away with what you went through and how you were able to sort of get yourself out of that. Do you want to mention briefly a little bit about how that was for you, that journey?
Yeah, I felt like I had to be completely transparent about that. And because it was part of what was shaping who I was and how I thought about things. I mean, just now I was sort of touching on how I think a lot of women fall prey to wanting to be valuable and wanting to belong and be loved. And for me, that compulsion was really heightened because when I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with depression. I went through, almost a decade of doctors trying to find the right medication. And then just as I graduated college, I had been seeing a doctor who had me on, as many as 9 medications at once, was giving me a bunch of
Careful.
different diagnoses that weren't accurate for me. And I had to go to a hospital to get off all of them. And it was scary. It was very stigmatizing. I mean, I had a boyfriend dump me afterwards because it was like, oh, I can't date a woman who was in a hospital. It's like
Ridiculous.
coming from, a little town in Delaware like I did, it was very, um, uh, it just was a life-changing experience for me because I just wanted to run away when it happened. I mean, I was running towards New York to go after my own dreams as a writer, but I also was running away from a life that I was very ashamed of now. So for a long time, I think I was using my career as a journalist because I was successful with that, even though that did take a very long time. And, this new persona I had is this like, fancy New Yorker. Like I was almost using that to compensate for the shame I was still carrying about this secret about being in this hospital. One of the things I shared in the book was that my father was a closeted crossdresser. And it was not something that he ever talked about with me, but it was something that changed his life and changed our lives. And when the list arrived, I felt like I was almost starting to become a person who was defined by my secrets more than like we talked about before, more than showing up and being who I really am. I was always this person who just was like, don't let them find out who I really am. It was to that degree. And I think I just felt like even though I couldn't relate to my dad's experience with his gender and his choices in his life, um, I could relate to the idea of how much having a secret can limit you from your full expression of who you are and how society was stigmatizing him and making him keep that secret. So I guess what it occurred to me was I need to share this. I need to talk about these things that I experienced and that I used to be ashamed of so that I don't have that shame anymore and so that the reader understands why I needed so badly to get out of my comfort zone because quite honestly, what started happening for me with my dad's death was that was now becoming a second hospital. That was becoming a second source of fear and anxiety and shame. And if I couldn't reframe that, if I couldn't find a way to get acceptance of the fact that he died the way that he did, and that's not to say that, distracted driving is okay. It's
Right.
just in my particular situation, I needed to accept that this was the way he died, and now he was with me in a new form. Like I couldn't get there if I had too much shame and needed to not talk about it. Like I needed to find a way to talk about the fact that this happened to him so that I could move forward and find gratitude in it. I mean, I'm not grateful that he died when I was 25, but I am grateful that I found peace about it, and
Yes.
I fully accept that was part of his life plan and it was part of mine.
I love that. I love that. There is a saying, secrets keep you sick. And I can see
Yeah.
how um people staying in that mode of secrecy, they're not living life authentically. And
Mhm.
how amazing too. You not only shared about your your struggles with, getting off the medication and going through mental health clinics and all of that, but also your own experience with your father and the courage to learn. In your book, you talked about meeting with someone who is an expert, and you're like, I want to learn. Let's go. Teach me. That to me is so much love that you were showing for your father, for the who you are, and trying to really learn and be present with everything in regards to that. So that's beautiful. You mentioned before about the grasshopper going around, and the you also mentioned a dragonfly, and I had no idea that grasshoppers only go forward. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's why a grasshopper showed up in my life. I was with you and the entire time when you were talking about. Now every time I see a dragonfly, I remember the part of the book that you talked
The
about.
dragonfly's maturity.
Yes.
It symbolizes
And
maturity, yeah.
so beautiful. Then you had other quotes that I took note of. I'm responsible for my own happiness. That was so beautiful. That felt so right. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, I'm responsible. It was a knowing. It was a I am
Yeah.
doing this. It was a transformation. Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, I think I was 21 when I had
Mm.
that realization. It was after my grandmother died.
Oh.
And boy, you're gonna make me cry. It was the kind of thing that I mean, you asked me before, did I have any connection with spirit before my dad died? And that probably would be another example of that because I remember feeling like, I'm getting now a taste of, well, this is real life. People die, and I was pretty young, but she died of natural causes. She had colon cancer and she was ill, and it didn't seem weird to me that she had passed away at, age 80, but I was feeling like, what would she want me to do? What advice would she give me for how to live my life? And that would be the kind of advice she would give, that because she was such an independent woman. And so often on this tour and going and talking to people and doing interviews like I'm doing with you right now, or I've had these TV interviews I've gotten to do, and just the
So
exposure
cool.
I'm getting with this, it's like I know my grandmother is cheering for me because she saw that in me at a really young
Mhm.
age and she nurtured it, and she
Mhm.
taught me that I was responsible for the choices I made in my life.
Ah,
And that I couldn't
I'm
just,
getting
we
goosebumps.
can't depend on other people to make us happy. If you have to try to nurture that friendship with yourself, with your
Yes.
higher self, because you always have something inside of you that is guiding you and looking out for
Mm.
you. It doesn't have to be a spirit of a dead loved one. And it shouldn't be the people all around you. It's not their job, like you
Mhm.
have to be able to be okay in any situation. And that's really, I think,
Yeah.
what that was about, because that was when I was going through that with all the medications.
Yeah. It's very difficult for such a young person to say I'm responsible for my own happiness. That requires a level of maturity that, it's hard to find. There was
Yeah.
another piece where you talked about the horseshoe, and I love, love, love when you said that love can enter when you give it away. Oh, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Can you talk about that? Because I cannot even give it justice, but that was so phenomenal.
I'm just so thrilled to be talking to you. And you're a person who got all the symbols. That's so cool because I don't always get to talk about all this stuff. I really like mythology. I really like just noticing these very little visual omens that we have. Like the book The Alchemist talks about, look for the
Yes.
omens. That's really what I was doing on this journey. The horseshoe ended up becoming the symbol for the entire thing for me, because I recognized that there were two different positions. I mean, if you hang a horseshoe on your house and it's in the U shape, that's a much more conservative position because what you're saying is, I don't want my luck to spill out and I don't want to lose anything. And when I learned about that, I sort of related to it because I thought, oh, that's how I have felt since my dad died. I've been trying to save face, like I said, wearing masks, having a persona since I was in the hospital, and I was so embarrassed about it. I've been this. I've been, let's acquire stuff, like let me see, like let me make the world think that I'm good, that I'm okay. It's almost like I've started wearing armor, which a lot of people do when they go through something traumatic.
Yes.
But I wasn't able to fully feel, I wasn't able to fully be in the moment and live my life. Instead, it was more like I just was trying to look as though I was living a great life. And I think that's something now, we're in an age now where that's happening a lot with people, with social media and things like that. And this was even before that. But then when I learned that there's another position of the horseshoe that's lucky, which is more like a rainbow shape or an arch shape. And of course that's in the East, right? Like it's with Eastern philosophy, like everything is the opposite of how we do things in the West. And that,
Totally.
like, if you believe in that position as lucky, what you're saying is, I trust in providence. I trust that there's a
Mhm.
greater power that is bringing
Yes.
things to me. And I recognize, well, wait a minute, if I'm going to choose this position for what I wear, and you can see I'm wearing it today, like this is the horseshoe
Oh.
that I wear now. Yeah.
So she's referring to a necklace that has the U upside
Yeah,
down
the arch
U.
upside down.
Yes,
Yeah, because it's a
yes.
reminder. And sometimes I've noticed I'll be in conversation with people, and I have my fingernail on this little ridge at the
Oh,
top of it.
I
almost like
love
I'm saying,
that.
okay, you know,
Bring
source,
it.
give me something. I'm trying
Yes.
to like, download here. But I mean, the
Mhm.
thing I recognized about that position that was so cool is that if you want to live that way, if you want to truly have faith that there's something bigger than you involved, and it's
Mhm.
not just you in this little boat trying to like
Mhm.
get stuff, you're here for a reason and you're being
Mhm.
given gifts and you're being given opportunities and connections for a
Yes.
reason. If you want to believe that,
Mhm.
what goes hand in hand in it is you also have to let go.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't be in that little boat
Surrender.
anymore, that little bucket holding on and just holding on and holding on.
Mhm.
You have to
Mhm.
be willing to be the spirit that you are walking
Mhm.
through life and giving, with open arms and open hands, finding
Mhm.
opportunities to give to other people. And it
Ah,
occurred to me that's how love works.
yes.
God loves us so much, and we're meant
Yes.
to um, replicate that in our connections with
Mhm.
others. And so now when I meet new people or I'm even reconnecting with an old friend, and I'm having many opportunities to do that on this book tour, I'm always being guided by that. I'm always
Mhm.
thinking, what can I do to make this person feel loved? Or at least to express it. You can't
Yeah.
change how people feel about themselves, but
Mhm.
you can adjust how you are in the moment. And I
Mhm.
really do believe we're supposed to do that. And that's why I embrace this, because I
Yes.
find that if I let go of that need to control my luck or
Mhm.
how I experience love with others, everything flows, and
Yes.
things happen that I never could have expected. Things happen in a way that is so much better than I
Mhm.
ever could have dreamed of. So, I mean, if you're going to
Yes.
go after things in your life that you dream about doing, it's a much better way to go about it. And I feel blessed that I discovered it because now I can just live that way all the time.
I love that. I love that. You should totally start creating necklaces, that go with the book and sell
Maybe,
them.
yeah.
Yes,
Well,
honestly, I
it's
will.
interesting. I just met a jeweler. It's interesting you say that. I met a jeweler at my reading in Woodstock, and she's like, I'm going to create one that's inspired by you and this
I
book. So
would.
I'm thinking, like,
Like,
I need to find her and see if she can, like, link to it or
yes.
something.
Yeah, honestly, because it would be a movement. Like I can see myself wearing that as a movement, as a
Yeah.
way of telling the world, like I am here, given and trusting God to provide for me so I can shower for everybody else. Like I would totally wear one. If you're
Okay.
doing it,
I'll
I'll
look into it. I mean,
yeah.
it's what reminds me. It's funny. I kind of part of me is like, "Oh, but it's just my thing." But you're right. Like if other people relate to it, maybe it would be
Yes.
cool for them
A
to have that too.
ring. I
Yeah.
would totally wear a ring too with the little U-shaped thing. So, and I love what you're saying because we tend to hold on. Like, I gotta hold on because I don't know when it's coming again. And that's
Yeah.
scarcity thinking. And what you're
Exactly.
saying is like, just shower me with your grace, which is so
Well,
beautiful.
yeah, and the point of abundance isn't so that you can collect it all in a bucket and be like, "Look at
Eh.
all I have." It's so you can share it.
Yes, exactly. Something that I wanted to ask you, why I was driving to Taos and I was listening to your book and I was curious, like you speak so much of New Mexico and your experiences. Like, tell me, what is it about it that you are so drawn? Like, why did you even, and in the book you said that you got married, right? In New Mexico. So why that place? What is it about it that I didn't hear about that. So tell me.
I just think I'm drawn to it. Georgia O'Keeffe lived there. She was my favorite
Yes,
artist.
love her.
And also just one of my heroes. My husband went there before I did, and it was part of his cross-country trip to Seattle. And it's funny because like I just spent the last couple of days with his friend who he went out there with because she lives there
Oh,
now.
wow.
So she was telling me little stories that I hadn't heard before. But when I met him, he said, we're gonna like he was in Seattle, I was in New York. It was right after my dad died, and we took this crazy cross-country trip together from Seattle to New York. And it was not quite what I thought it was going to be. Wasn't as romantic as I thought it would be because my dad had just passed away. But a year later, after we had survived our first year in New York, he said, "Well, I really want to bring you back to the Southwest." That was what I discovered on my first drive, and it's so different from here. And it really was. It was like it was almost like a palate cleanser of New York City for me. As much as I do love New York too, and I still live just right outside of it, it just felt like heaven. It felt like otherworldly, like a place I'd never been before. And the way they embrace artists there and
Yes.
creativity, and the spirituality of Native American cultures was something that really resonated with me. I mean, even now we're talking about this, excuse me, this art-shaped necklace, and then if you walk anywhere in New Mexico, you're going to see the squash blossom necklaces with the horseshoe, which is really almost like a crescent at the bottom. And that's the eastern one.
Wow.
That's where
Oh,
that the reason they have that there is it came from the east. The Spanish
mm,
Moors brought that shape to New Mexico. So I mean, you're
wow.
already living in a culture where you have that necklace everywhere.
Yes.
But
Wow.
it's a very feminist symbol too, right? I think part of why they wear those necklaces is almost like I might be wrong about this, but in my study of those cultures, I believe it's a more of a matriarchal culture. A lot of the Native American cultures there. So I love places that are like that. I love artistic enclaves. I think for me, New Mexico is just one of the few places I've discovered where I felt like it was a nurturing environment for me to grow and be more who
Yeah.
I am.
For sure. Everybody was so nice when I went there. And the culture, I went to the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum too. And it's just so empowering, so beautiful and bright. It's just, what a great experience for sure. I like it. Um, I have a question for you that I didn't hear in the book, which is why why were you vegan or why are you vegan? And is that something that you've always been or something you took on?
That sort of it aligns with the horseshoe philosophy a
Mm,
little bit, because at some point I started recognizing that the type of activism I was doing, I was finding outlets for my anger with my
mm,
activism at that time. I was really almost like tisking and like shaming people and being like, God, I told you about distracted driving. Why are you still texting? Like
mhm,
just not speaking in a tone that was conducive to growth and conducive to
mhm,
learning, and being
mm,
like, hey, my tragic experience should be enough for you to change your behavior. That's sort of how I was approaching it. And I had
mm,
an experience at a party where I found out that a loved one was doing that, and I really got emotional, and selfish in a way with the way I was expressing those emotions. And I kept saying to myself, oh, well, I'm an activist first, like before I think about my family. And then I got really bummed out because I thought, well, that's not right. Yeah, I can't be an
mm,
activist first. I have to be love first, like love for my family. That
mm,
matters to me. That matters to me more than anything ever, even more than my writing. So I figured out eventually that, and I was saying this to my husband, why is it that I could be working so hard to educate about safe driving and it's not sticking with people who love me? And he said, because, you can't, like, he basically was like, you have to be the change yourself. You can't force people to change. And then he said, I've been showing you things about animal rights for years and you're not vegan. He's like, and he had been vegan himself for like 8 years at that point. And I would say I ate vegan, I don't know, 75% of the time. And because my
mm.
husband's a great cook, so I'm very lucky. So
Nice.
I thought maybe as an experiment, I could try his diet. I could try to live the way that he does, because what he was doing was role modeling for me, because he was the kind of person who was making the choice to be vegan, but he didn't force it on anybody else ever. He was
Mhm,
basically just saying, this is what's right for me, and this is how I live, and I'm not going to hide it. And then it occurred to me, oh, I could apply that to my safe driving stuff
that's
too.
a really good point.
I could
Yeah.
say, this is how I live, this is what works for me, I'm not
Mm,
going to hide it. And that's it. That's all I had to do. And, you
love
make
it.
your own choices.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you the information and the
Hmm.
education about it, but I can't control it,
Yeah.
what you're going to
Yeah.
choose to do out of. And I recognize it was sort of like a convenience thing. Even though
Hmm.
someone might know or understand, oh, I know that people die sometimes when people use their phones. If they feel
Hmm.
like, oh, that's not going to happen to me, I'm in the moment. So, like, I'm just going to do what I need to do. That's really
Hmm.
why people are making those choices, because that's how our culture is nurturing that. And I just thought, if I choose to eat vegan, then I'm having an impact on something. I'm impacting animals and I'm impacting the environment. And there's so many different things I'm participating in by making that choice. And I feel more connected in a way. So I just feel like I need to have that be the way I do everything. So that's what I do now. I just try to be the change. And I think that's
Awesome.
probably that's probably why the veganism stuck. I think otherwise it might not have. Because I was just so insistent, like I need to make this work. And
I love it. Oh,
honestly, since then, I mean, it's been 5 years, and vegan food has come a long way. It's not as
yes.
hard to do now.
And it does help to have a husband that cooks really good vegan food for
Yes,
sure.
it does. I need to
Yes.
learn. I need to get better myself. But yeah, I'm very fortunate.
That's awesome. There was something else that you mentioned, um, crystals showing up everywhere. Would you say that that's sort of like your dad's sign, or is more like you just tuning into the earth or the
Yeah,
essence?
I mean, yeah, I've never thought about it like that. That's really interesting because I have become, like I was just saying, I feel more connected to animals
Hmm.
and to the environment. And, I talk about tree symbolism a lot in my book because that was the one thing I was noticing was like a pattern, like showing up everywhere I went. Of course, right? Because there's trees everywhere. But
Yes.
there's all different kinds of trees, and I was like,
Yes.
oh, I wonder what that one means, and I would look it up later. And when I would find different kinds of stones, a lot of the times they were part of a mountain I was hiking, and it's like the experience of getting to the top of that mountain was so meaningful to me that I think I wanted a piece of it to
Mm,
bring with me to remember. And like I'm right now, during our conversation, I've been holding my green aventurine heart,
love
which helped me
that.
write the book because this was the
Yes.
first one I ever got. I got this in a little town called Madrid in New
That's
Mexico on
beautiful.
the side of the road, and it just called to me, and I didn't know what aventurine was. I didn't know what it meant. I just felt
Hmm.
like this is something that's going to help me be brave. And
Hmm.
green aventurine helps you embrace new adventures. It
Wow.
gives you courage. That's what it is. And the fact that
Wow.
it's heart shaped too really
Yes. And the
resonated with
color
me.
green, which is a color of the heart chakra.
Exactly, because
Wow.
I recognize, like I had my first ever experience with a psychic right when I was starting my book, and I had just lost my job, and I was very afraid, and I was like, oh, is this okay that I'm writing this book? I'm using my voice, which, as I've said, and I said in the book many times, I was very afraid to use my true voice, the real me. And she said to me, the experiences that you've had that you want to write about are things that many people have had,
Yeah.
but they don't necessarily have the words. And that's why you have to do this. And she said
Yes.
she could sense a green aura around me, like in that moment, because she said by doing it, I was opening up that chakra and I was finally
Wow.
allowing. And in a way, that is sort of like that horseshoe symbolism, right? Because like when you
Yes.
open up your heart, not only are you letting love in, but you're letting it out too. And I honestly think we're living in a time where a lot of people have blocked heart chakras.
Yes, yes. It gives me goosebumps. I was just trying to remember you said something, voices born for this, but there was something else. There was a quote that you said, it is only when we're comfortable in our skin that we are alive. Like I'm getting
Yeah.
goosebumps again, just soaking that in. Only when we're comfortable in our skin that we are alive. That was so powerful for me to hear and to understand the journey that you've gone through and feeling so comfortable with yourself where you're saying, okay, I don't have to fight for this. I can just be okay. Or if no one is being a vegan, it's okay. I can still do that because I want
Yeah.
to. And incredible, incredible work. Um, you also mentioned a few times like the thin place. I just love how you started little quotes and sort of telling the audience like that's what it is. That's what it is. This is the cue.
Yeah, it was like a heartbeat.
Yes, love that.
I wanted it to
Sorry,
feel like that.
cat, cat just jump. Um, yeah, it definitely feels like that was what it was, a heartbeat. And then another quote that you said, going back a little bit about your dad, it was um, to let into my dad's world, all I needed was a locksmith. And
Yeah.
oh, that just gave me just I was so emotional when I was listening to that because you're so eloquent with your words. I felt like I was listening to poetry
Thank
when
you.
you were yes, you were talking about so many things, but it was so symbolic and the locksmith and what that meant and getting into people's worlds and I honestly would not have enjoyed it as much, I think, if I had written in paper because I could hear in your voice the emotions that you were transmitting.
Yeah, people have
And
told me that. Yeah.
yeah, love
Yeah, but
that.
you know,
Love
I think that's how spirit communicates
that.
is the
Mm,
thing. I think spirit communicates in poetry,
symbols.
in
Yes.
symbols, and there you know when it's something from the other side because it's simple and it's
Yes.
beautiful. And when you look, it's like when you look at art, when you look at paintings and you feel something. And that's why people go to these museums and they look at these things. Or when you go and listen to an orchestra, or you go to a show, it's like you're connecting on a level that's so simple. It's not
Yes.
complicated, you know?
Yes.
And so finding the exact right word to explain an experience like that, it's like I always felt I was drawing on something else, like something else was helping me.
Yes. Love, love, love for sure. Every part of your book. And I wanted to ask you, where can people find your book or buy your book? And well, first of all, the name of your book, of course, which I'll put it there, but if you want to talk a little bit about it, I can also
Yeah, it's
say it, but
My Father's List, How Living My Dad's Dreams Set Me Free.
I love that. I
People
love
always
that.
say,
And
sometimes people will say that flippantly, like, "Oh, how did it set you free?" And it's like, God, what a hard question to answer because there's so
just
many
read the
ways.
book.
Yeah, well, no, 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 no. I mean, there's so many ways, but I would say probably the most principal way is when I say me, set me free, it's that me you and I have been talking about this whole time, right? It's that real me, that heart that's right here that was just wanting. I mean, I think I have a moment in the book where I describe going through therapy as a teenager and sensing there was a little girl in there and no one was
Yes.
listening to her. And I was the one not listening to her. And how many of us have a little girl right in here, who wants to be heard and who was never fully heard, and not because I had wonderful parents. That's the thing. Like, it's not their fault. It was that I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't
Yes.
know, a culture was not teaching me that that little girl's
Mhm.
voice mattered.
Yes. It's
I mean,
it's
I'm
incredible.
one of the lucky ones. I'm lucky that I had a mother who listened to me, but we
Hmm.
don't, I mean, if you don't have that either, it's a
Yeah.
longer road.
It's really interesting because I have heard many people that have wonderful parents, but still they will always find fault in their parents and not see the entire picture. And I could hear in your writing that you were seeing your parents as human. You were
Yeah.
not putting them in a pedestal. You were not either sending them to hell. You were seeing them as human and seeing the gifts that they were giving you in every step of the way, which was really, really incredible. And
You're
then
gonna make me
also,
cry. Yeah.
well, I see it. I see your perspective. Your perspective is humble and it is also so insightful. And of course, going to therapy and everything helps a lot. Um, but I think that in your nature is that in your nature is to see the upside down, things, the see the other side of the other perspective of things. Like I think that that's who you are in general. And
Thank you.
nowadays, of course, everybody's just, talking about, oh yeah, my therapist said this and said that, but back then, you could never talk about therapy. You would just hide that you were ever
Yep.
receiving treatment. And so I think that the book arrives in such a place where people need to understand how hard it was and how lucky they are that they can now be so willingly able to go and get therapy if they wanted to.
Yeah,
Um,
but even I appreciate that you said that, but also I think even with therapy, it's like if you're not getting some kind of spiritual therapy as well, like a
mm,
spiritual treatment, there's only so much that identifying a mental health issue or psychological issue or something with regulating your emotions, there's only so far that that can go. There's only so much that that can do. When a lot of times what people really are feeling is a spiritual depression, and they're not in touch with who they really are. And that was a journey I went on myself that I had to figure out. And I think a lot of people do need to do that.
Can you say a little bit more about spiritual depression?
You could feel spiritually bankrupt. You could have everything going your way or seemingly on paper, and feeling like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm a true adult now because I can regulate my emotions and I don't let them get the best of me. Or, I feel like, okay, my ADHD, that's in check. Like I'm accomplished and I'm being financially stable, and I'm true to my word. And, I've made all this progress with all these different things, and maybe even like your relationships are finally going smoothly because you've now navigated that and you have figured out how to be accepting and forgiving of people and also forgiving of yourself. But if you are still lost in a spiritual way and you don't have any kind of relationship with something larger than you, whatever that might be, I don't care what it is, but
Yeah.
even if it's just the higher you, like we were talking
Hmm.
about before, if you don't believe that there's something more, it can become a spiritual bankruptcy because it's like
Mm.
you don't have your why. You don't have
Yeah.
your why am I living? Why am I here? Why am I
Mm.
doing this?
Mm.
Does it even matter? And I
Yeah.
do think we're living in a time where that's a big issue for people.
Mhm. How
So
did you
that's why
learn
we're seeing
that?
this. I'm sorry.
No, no, please continue. I interrupted.
I was gonna say that's why I think we're seeing this mindfulness movement right now.
Hmm. Hmm. How did you learn to be that spiritually connected?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think I always was, and I didn't know it was real. I think
Mm.
I always had it, like we were talking in the beginning of our interview,
Mm.
this ability to connect on a deep level. But I just thought it was a superstition or something. Like
Mm.
if I lived in a headspace, like a lot of people do, I wasn't living in a heart space then. And when you live in
Mm.
a headspace, you need proof. You
Yeah.
need logical answers for things. And I think in order to do my dad's list and go on a lot of these adventures, and some of them seem, pretty out there for who I was, it required so much faith and trust that it was putting me in that space to allow
Mm.
that person I really was to blossom on the inside.
Mm.
And also, I think just being out in nature more, I
Mm.
became a runner, and becoming a runner changed me because it meant, when I first started running, I was so embarrassed about my what my running might look like that I would do it only inside. Like I would be on the treadmill and I would be at the gym at work, and I was like, oh God, what if my outfit's wrong? It was like ridiculous. And then eventually I made the leap and I started running outside. And that's a big difference because being out in the world and saying, okay, I don't care about my form. I don't care if you think I'm fast or slow. I'm going to be out here doing this. And I think that really put me back in touch with who I was as a little girl, that little girl navigating the woods with her dad and her brother. Even though I'm now running, I'm still back out there. And that's where we're supposed to be. There's a reason why when we go on hikes, we feel like we're home.
Yeah. I keep asking you, like, where did you get that? Because I know that there are some people that were raised, in certain religion or traditions where they're like, oh, yeah, that's part of who I am. My grandparents were doing this, whatever. There are people who have spiritual awakenings or experiences, and there's people that find their spiritual connection through some purpose or something that they do. And I was just wondering, like, where were you in that category? And it seemed like you are a little bit of everything, growing up in a
Yeah.
small town and with religious parents, but also in nature. And then just having your grandmother and so many different people in situations that sort of like felt you like you were connected to something. But then also, I think that the connection with your dad through your book and through the list, I think that like really, really awakened that. Am I interpreting that
Yeah, and
correctly?
I mean the only other piece of the puzzle I think is my marriage. I think it's my marriage more than
Mm,
anything else
in
because
what
I
way?
married my soulmate.
Oh,
And when I met him, I knew it was different. You know, I knew
Mm.
this was a different connection than
Oh,
these other guys I'd been dating, and nothing against those other
um,
guys. I fell in love with someone in college and he was lovely, but when I met Steven, it was like we met online. It wasn't in a bar like I was used to, and he fell in love with me, you know, for my brain and
wow.
my heart and my words and our
Oh,
voices on the phone together. And that's a very different way of falling in love with someone than through
yeah.
appearance, mostly.
Wow. Wow.
And we just became best friends. And, you know, it's been 20 years now. And
That's incredible.
this is a person who has helped me be brave enough to be who I really am because that's
Mm.
who he loves. And I hope I do the same for him. And I think if you have that in your life, it speeds things up a little bit with finding your
Yeah.
purpose.
Totally. Oh, that's beautiful and so supportive. I can see, and I was reading in the book as well how he was like, "Yep, you go travel. You want to go travel, go for it. No worries, and I'll be here and supported you in every trip and
Mostly, yeah.
every."
It's
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
you know, we all have our hiccups.
Of course. Yeah, of course. It's not always perfect. So if you could look at your journey and the conversations we had today, what would be one, two, or three things that you would like to recommend people to do or suggest or something that you think, wow, this really served me and maybe can serve you? What would be some of that?
I would say the first thing is look at yourself in the mirror. Like do
Mm.
it regularly.
Oh,
Really,
that's
really do it. Because I think a lot of people who have shame that they've been carrying for a long time, and this was something that I used to experience, when you look at yourself in the mirror, you might be making yourself up for going out in the world, but you're not looking in your eyes. I mean, sometimes you can have so much shame you can't do it. You can't even look in your own eyes. And I mean, if you look in the eyes of a person you love, who you're intimate with, why can't you look into your own? You
wow.
know,
Wow, that's
that
really
that's a
good.
that's a small thing, but it's a big thing for a lot of
Huge,
people. Yeah.
huge,
I mean,
totally. Oh,
because it can be scary for someone who's carrying a lot of shame to do that, because that
yes.
might mean working on the things in your life that, like, whatever you're doing to numb, you know, or whatever you're still carrying, the emotions you don't want to deal with, you don't want to feel. You're going to have to bring those up and start working on them if you can just look at yourself first. So
Yes,
look in
yes.
your
And
own
it's
eyes. That's step one. I would say step
mm,
two, write a list of the things that matter to you.
ooh.
Someone pointed out to me the other day very astutely that I had mentioned in an interview that I did that a couple years before I found my dad's list. And it was just on a whim. I read about women doing it and I thought, oh, I'm going to try this. It was actually, it sounds so stupid, but it was a diet program. The
Mm-hmm.
women were trying to lose weight, and it was like the group of women that actually wrote the values list were able to lose a couple of pounds, whereas the other group didn't. And I was about to get married and thinking about my wedding dress. That's really all it was. But I'm so happy I did that because what it did for me is it really clarified who I am. And I had
Mm-hmm.
this list now that I carried in a notebook, and I could look at it whenever I wanted to. You can put it on your phone, you can do it anywhere. But to actually say to yourself, here's what I value, I think it does something where it takes the pressure off. Like it takes your focus of am I valuable? It
Mm-hmm.
takes that and it shifts it to what do I value, right? So now you're approaching life as a subject and you're taking that agency and that ownership of what you're doing. And that's so different from, you know, like we were talking about before, am I a woman who is valuable
Mm-hmm.
to others? Because who cares? Like it
Yes.
just doesn't, you become valuable to others when you give, when you
Yeah.
add value, like you're through your actions, not through any accoutrements, anything about you. It's what you're doing. So
I
I think
love
that's
that.
step two. And then step three would be write your list. Write what you want to
Yes.
do, and it can be just like my dad did. I think he was
Mm-hmm.
really wise in writing, this is what I would like to do. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
duties, they weren't obligations, they weren't,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes people have said to me, oh, I'm afraid to write a bucket list because it means I have to get it all done. And you don't have to. That's not
Yeah.
how fun works.
Exactly.
But that's what you're
Exactly.
doing, right? When you write a list, you're prioritizing fun. Like you're getting to
Mm-hmm.
feel like a little kid again, and you're saying, I know I have all these responsibilities in my day-to-day life. I know I have that, and these are my
Mm-hmm.
commitments I make. but I
Mm,
also make room for this. I make room for enjoying
mm,
being alive. And
mm,
I really do think that step three of getting to have this closeness with your spiritual self
mm,
and a very inner sense of purpose. Because once you set out on doing something that truly is interesting to you, that you're curious about, that you're yearning to learn more about, that means that that's the thing you're supposed to do. Like that's how you find it. Because people are always saying, "Oh, what's my purpose? I don't know what I'm supposed to do." But that it's like that intersection of the thing that you love that makes time go away when you're doing it and that you just want to learn more. You have like an insatiable appetite to learn more about. And that's what should be on your list. I mean, fun
yes.
things that are just for a whim too. Whatever you want. That's the cool part. You can just choose whatever you want. And now you're making your own rule book for your life. So
Mm.
you're free to live as you as opposed to am I enough for everybody else?
Ah, love that, love that, love that so, 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 so much. I have like a million more questions, but we're gonna have to do we're gonna have to do round two because I just I'm
Yeah, I would
fascinated
love
by
to do that.
everything
I
that
love
you're
talking to
bringing.
you.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I'm really like really inspired by you, by what you're saying. The journey that started as like I'm going to avenge my father, kind of feeling
There was
to
anger in the beginning. Yeah, yeah.
now this like wow, thank you, for this gift. It's just oh, I'm just getting goosebumps. Um so, where can people find you? And then when you launch your jewelry, where can they find that? And I'm assuming, well, I know the book is available on Amazon because I bought it there, but where
Yeah,
can they
yeah.
find more
My
about your
website,
course?
yeah, my website has all the links by lauracarney.com. So you can just go there,
Nice.
BY Laura Carney. And yeah, maybe you're right. You're more of an entrepreneur than I am, I think, Nancy. I need to hook up with that jeweler and
Yeah,
start
yeah.
selling her wares.
I know, and the entrepreneurs that are going to listen to this podcast are going to be like, and she could do this, and she could do that. So we're going to be inundated with suggestions. So really, a real good pleasure talking to you. I just feel like so inspired and so honored that you joined us here today. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I feel honored that you got so much out of my writing. It really touches my heart. Thank you so